The rain was falling in sheets that night, turning the city into a blur of silver lights and cold pavement. Inside the towering glass building, everyone had already gone home. Everyone except Ethan Carter, the billionaire CEO who never left his office before midnight, and Sophie, the young janitor who worked in silence when the world was asleep. Ethan never noticed her before. To him, she was just another uniform passing by his door, another name he didn't bother to learn. But when the storm hit, something happened that neither of them could have imagined. The power flickered, the elevator stopped, and the man who controlled entire empires found himself trapped and powerless in a dark steel box. For long minutes, there was only the sound of rain pounding against the windows and Ethan's own breathing echoing in the narrow space. He pressed every button, tried every emergency call, but nothing worked. The panic rose in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. That was when he heard her voice, soft and uncertain, calling out through the crack in the doors. "Sir, are you okay in there?" Sophie asked, her hand shaking as she tried to pry the doors apart. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to matter. Yet in that moment, she was the only person in the world who could reach him. And something in her steady gaze made his heartbeat slow, just a little. Neither of them knew it yet, but this stormy night was about to unravel every rule Ethan had lived by. The walls he'd built around himself, the distance he'd kept from everyone, especially someone like her, would start to crack. And when the rain finally stopped, nothing between them would ever be the same again. Ethan Carter was the kind of man people whispered about when he walked past. At only 35, he had built Carter Industries into one of the most powerful corporations in the country. Tall, impeccably dressed, and always serious, Ethan was known for making decisions that shaped markets overnight. But behind the polished image, he carried a loneliness he never allowed anyone to see. Success had a cost, and he paid it every day in silent corridors and empty boardrooms. Sophie Miller was 27 and never dreamed of working in a place like this. Her life had taught her to keep her head down, do her job, and never expect kindness from strangers in expensive suits. Every night, she put on her janitor's uniform and cleaned the glossy floors of Carter Tower, wondering if her dreams of finishing college and becoming a teacher were slipping further away. The night of the storm, fate pushed their worlds together. For the first time, Ethan looked into Sophie's eyes and saw more than a uniform. He saw a woman who refused to leave him alone when he was in trouble. A woman who didn't care about his title or his wealth. She was real in a way he had almost forgotten existed. As they spoke through the crack in the elevator doors, something shifted between them. Ethan felt an unfamiliar warmth he couldn't name. Sophie felt a courage she didn't know she had. And while the rain crashed against the building, two hearts began to beat in a shared rhythm neither of them understood yet. Before we dive into this unforgettable story of unexpected love, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Your support means so much, and if you're enjoying the story so far, please like this video and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Whether you're in New York, London, or a small town somewhere in between, we'd love to know. Now, let's begin the first chapter of Ethan and Sophie's journey. The elevator doors groaned but wouldn't budge. Sophie knelt on the floor with a flashlight in one hand and a crowbar in the other, her palms sweaty. She wasn't trained for this. She had just been emptying trash bins when she noticed the power failure on the panel. Then she heard someone calling out from inside the elevator, his voice sharp, commanding, and surprisingly calm. "Is anyone out there?" Ethan had said. "I'm stuck." Sophie recognized the voice. It was the CEO himself. Her heart jumped. She hesitated. Was she even allowed to speak to him? Still, she forced herself to answer. "Yes, I'm here. I think the power's out. I can call someone. There's no signal, he cut in. Already tried. Is there any way to pry the doors open? She swallowed her nervousness and crouched down. I'll try. Minutes passed as she fought with the crowbar. It felt like the entire building was watching her fail. Finally, with a metallic screech, the doors cracked open just a few inches, enough for them to see each other. Their eyes met for the first time. His expression softened slightly as he looked at her. She was younger than he expected, with kind eyes and flushed cheeks from effort. And she wasn't afraid, not of him, not of the situation. She had a steadiness that surprised him. "Thank you," he said, quieter now. "What's your name?" She blinked. "Sophie." "Thank you, Sophie," he repeated. "You didn't have to stay." "I wasn't going to leave you in there," she replied, almost amused. He let out a small laugh, his first in weeks. Something about the way she said it made him forget for a moment that he was the CEO and she was the janitor. They ended up talking while they waited for maintenance, about nothing and everything. Where she grew up, how he hated coffee but drank it anyway, how she wanted to be a teacher but couldn't afford school right now. He listened, really listened, and she noticed. He wasn't just powerful, he was tired. Tired of being surrounded by people who wanted things from him. Her presence felt like a pause in a life that moved too fast. Eventually, the elevator hummed back to life. The doors slid open. He stepped out and looked at her one last time before walking away, his expression unreadable. Sophie returned to her cart of supplies, her hand still shaking slightly. She didn't know it yet, but that stormy night had already changed everything. The next night, Sophie thought maybe he would pretend it hadn't happened. Men like Ethan Carter didn't remember people like her. But when she arrived on the 22nd floor, she found him standing by the windows watching the skyline glitter in the darkness. He turned as she pushed her cleaning cart down the hall. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the memory of the elevator suspended in the air between them. Then he nodded once, as if acknowledging something neither of them could name. "Hi, Sophie," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Hello, Mr. Carter," she replied, her hands curling around the mop handle. "Ethan," he corrected quietly. "Just Ethan." The word felt strange on her tongue. She hadn't expected him to remember her name, let alone offer his. He didn't leave his office that night. Instead, he sat at his desk, reading reports while she worked. Every so often, their eyes would meet. She tried to focus on cleaning, but her heart wouldn't stop racing. Around midnight, she heard his footsteps approach. He held out a cup of tea, his expression awkward. "It's late. Thought you might want something warm." She took it, her fingers brushing his. The contact was brief, but it felt like a spark in the quiet. "Thank you," she said, her voice unsteady. They spoke in low voices as the hours passed. He told her about the early days of his company, about the nights he slept in the office because he was too stubborn to give up. She told him how she used to tutor kids at the library, how she still kept lesson plans in a box under her bed just in case her life ever changed. Every story she shared made him see her more clearly. She wasn't just kind, she was brilliant, determined. She made him remember what it felt like to dream without calculating the cost. When dawn began to lighten the skyline, Ethan realized he didn't want the night to end. But as Sophie gathered her things, she paused at the door. "Thank you for the tea," she said, her eyes meeting his. He watched her disappear down the hall, already wondering how he'd wait another day to see her again. Days passed, and each night, Sophie found herself lingering on the 22nd floor a little longer. She told herself it was just polite to say hello, but deep down, she knew it was more. There was something in Ethan's eyes that pulled her in, a gentleness that didn't match the stories people whispered about him. One evening, as she emptied the trash bins, she noticed a framed photo on his desk, a woman with warm eyes and a shy smile. She tried not to stare, but Ethan noticed her glance. "My mother," he explained, his voice quieter than usual. "She worked as a housekeeper. She raised me alone." Sophie felt a tightness in her chest. Maybe that was why he treated her differently. He saw a part of his past in her. "She would have liked you," he said, almost to himself. "She believed in people, even when she had nothing." Sophie looked away, feeling her cheeks grow warm. She didn't know what to say to a confession like that. That night, the power flickered again. The storm hadn't returned, but the building's old circuits were unreliable. When the lights blinked out for a moment, she felt his hand brush hers in the dark. Neither of them moved. For a breathless second, the world felt impossibly small. When the lights came back, they both stepped back quickly, as if the moment hadn't happened at all. But the memory of his touch stayed with her the rest of the night. Afterward, Ethan seemed different, more restless. He started asking her questions about her life, about the things she loved. He listened with the kind of focus that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. She told him about her dream of teaching, about the student loan she still owed. He didn't offer her to pay it. He didn't offer her anything, and somehow that made her trust him more. He wasn't trying to fix her life. He just wanted to know her. As dawn approached, Ethan walked her to the elevator. "Sophie," he began, his voice low. But the words caught in his throat. He couldn't admit the truth, not yet, that she was the first person in years who made him feel human again. She waited, her heart thudding, but he didn't finish the sentence. The elevator doors closed, leaving her alone with questions she didn't dare speak. And as she rode down to the lobby, she wondered if she'd ever be brave enough to ask what he'd been about to say. By the end of the week, everyone in the building had started to notice the way Ethan looked at Sophie. It was subtle, just an extra moment when his gaze lingered on her, or the way his voice softened when he spoke her name. But in a place where rumors were currency, it didn't take long for whispers to spread. Sophie felt the stares when she arrived for her shift. Other employees looked her up and down with thinly veiled contempt. More than once, she overheard them laughing behind her back, calling her the cleaning girl who thought she was special. She tried to ignore it, tried to remind herself she was only here to do her job, but each comment chipped away at her courage. The connection she'd felt with Ethan began to feel like a dangerous illusion. That night, when she reached the 22nd floor, she considered turning around and leaving. But Ethan was already waiting for her, his expression unreadable. "Don't let them make you feel small," he said quietly, as if he could hear every cruel word that had followed her. Her throat tightened. "They don't have to know me. They're right. I'm just the janitor." "No," he said, stepping closer. His eyes searched hers. "You're the only person here who sees me, not my money, not my title, just me." For a moment she almost believed him, but the voices of her co-workers echoed in her head, reminding her she didn't belong in his world. She turned away, gripping the handle of her cart like an anchor. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should ask to be transferred to another building. Her heart ached at the thought, but she couldn't stand feeling like she was waiting for the day he'd change his mind about her. Ethan felt something close to panic. He reached out, his hand hovering just inches from her shoulder. "Sophie," he began, but the words felt too small for everything he wanted to say. And as the silence stretched between them, she realized she wasn't sure she could keep coming back if this was all it would ever be. The next night, Sophie didn't come to the 22nd floor. Ethan waited past midnight, pretending to read reports he couldn't focus on. He told himself it was better this way, better to let her go before things became even more complicated. But when he finally walked to the window and looked down at the rain-soaked streets, he felt emptier than he ever had. Downstairs, Sophie worked in silence. Each hallway she cleaned felt longer than the last. She kept her head down, refusing to let herself think about Ethan's voice or the way he'd looked at her. It was easier to pretend none of it had ever happened. But as she passed the front desk, the security guard called out to her. "Mr. Carter left this for you." He handed her an envelope, thick with the weight of something important. She almost didn't open it, but curiosity and something deeper, hope, made her tear it carefully along the edge. Inside was a handwritten note. "Sophie, I don't expect you to forgive me for how I've handled this. I don't expect anything at all, but I need you to know that what I feel for you is real. I've spent my life building walls. You were the first person who ever made me wish I could tear them down." Her eyes blurred as she read the words again and again. She didn't know if she could trust him. She didn't know if she was brave enough to risk believing. But some part of her heart still ached for him, no matter how much she tried to deny it. She folded the note and slipped it into her pocket. All night she tried to focus on her work, but Ethan's confession wouldn't leave her thoughts. When her shift finally ended, she didn't go home. She rode the elevator back to the 22nd floor. Ethan was still there, sitting alone in his office with the lights off. When he saw her step through the doorway, he stood up so fast his chair rolled back. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "You shouldn't be here," he said, though his voice was raw with relief. "I know," she whispered, "but I had to ask you if you meant it, every word." He crossed the room and took her hands in his. "Every word," he said simply. And as the city lights flickered beyond the glass, she knew that whatever happened next, she had already made her choice. The morning after Sophie walked into Ethan's office and chose to stay, something quietly shifted in both their worlds. It didn't happen with fireworks or dramatic declarations. There was no press release, no grand speech in front of the company. But there were glances in the hallway, soft and certain. There were coffee cups shared in quiet corners, and there was the way Ethan looked at her, as if she were the most extraordinary thing he ever seen. That was enough. The whispers didn't stop. In fact, they grew louder. People questioned her place, judged her past, and mocked what they didn't understand. But Sophie no longer carried the weight of their words alone. Ethan stood beside her not as a man offering her protection, but as someone who believed in her voice. Slowly, she began to believe in it too. He encouraged her to return to school, and she did, this time not from a place of fear, but from the safety of knowing someone believed in her dreams as fiercely as she did. What they shared wasn't built on fairy tales or fleeting passion. It was something steadier, formed in midnight conversations, small acts of kindness, and the courage to be fully seen. Ethan learned to step away from the cold armor of power he had worn for so long. Sophie, in turn, allowed herself to imagine a life where love didn't come with conditions. Together, they created something neither had known they needed: peace. A home not in a place, but in each other. And maybe that's the most powerful kind of love, the one that doesn't try to fix you, but sees all your cracks and chooses to stay anyway. So if you're still waiting for your own unexpected storm to bring someone into your life, take heart. Love often walks in quietly, on ordinary nights, when you least expect it. Thank you for watching this story. If it touched your heart, please like the video, subscribe, and share in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Until next time, remember, love doesn't care about status. It cares about truth.